Do you have a shot on your timeline with flickering light and you just want to see, can I get rid of that flickering? It's distracting because maybe it was shot with slow motion or the shutter speed was a mismatch from the electrical grid. Well, we can do that inside of the DaVinci Resolve Fusion page. It's just a few steps. I've got the chapters marked. You want to follow along. We're covering things like stabilized point tracking, a painting with the clone multistroke using a still source that's a different frame, and then actually how do we extract that paint so we're only using the alpha from the paint stroke and then match moving it to the original plate, so we're affecting things the least possible but getting the best results. Now the footage, if you want to follow along, it's up on Cutting Club. Let's get started. Before we actually open this in the Fusion page, I just want to look at our project settings so you understand the color and Fusion settings I have going into there. So Shift 9 will open up your project settings, color management tab. Basically what I want to point out is that I'm not working color manage today. This is just DaVinci YRGB, which means it's going to do nothing to this log footage when I load it into Fusion. Now the Fusion setting down here, I have a default start frame set to 1001. The reason this matters is if you're following along, the frame number, the specific frame number, does matter for the clone multistroke. Now that that's out of the way, let's just open up the Fusion page. You can click the button or just hit Shift 5 with your playhead over the clip. We're going to turn off the viewing LUT for today as well. So that's this little waffle button if you have it on. So you can just see the log footage as it is. And step 1 is going to be to actually do an individual point tracker, an IntelliTrack on each one of these lights. But IntelliTrack, because it's AI based, and honestly any tracker, it does best when there's contrast in the footage. And this is Apple Log Rec 2020, so I want to get it into something with contrast to start. The CST node, you probably know and love already from the color page, is a good way to do that. So let's add that right after our log media in. So Shift Space, CST, and I'm going to set this so the input color space is Rec 2020, which is what the iPhone 16 Pro Max shoots, and the input gamma for that is going to be Apple Log, and the rest of this is fine. So Rec 709 with tone mapping, all of that is good to go. Now it's time to start tracking. As we take a look at this shot and evaluate, there are actually 6 different lights that we need to remove the flicker from right to left. And I think that's actually how I'm going to set up the comp to stay organized. I'm going to start with this light. We'll get tracking for this. We'll do a new tracker on this light, this one. And because this is a lot of rinse and repeat, I probably will set this up once and I'll continue working and just cut later into the tutorial so you don't have to see me doing the same thing over and over again. And if I do something different, I'll pause and let you know. So first thing I'm going to do is for tracking, Shift Space, Tracker Tool, just the standard point tracker. And we've got an IntelliTrack is dropped down onto the flow. I'm at frame 1001, the first frame in the sequence. If you're not there, somewhere else, if you just hit Command or Control left bracket, it takes you to the start of your shot. And if you do Command right bracket, it takes you to the end frame. Good way to know. The start and end frame for this point tracker do make a difference when we're doing the inverted stabilization, which is part of this process. So first thing I'm going to do, zoom on into here. I'm going to place this point right on the brightest part of the light on frame 1001. And then I like to view the result as I'm doing it. So I'm loading the tracker over here into the viewport. And all I need to do is just let this thing rip. So over on the right side of the inspector, you can either do frame at a time or just let it go. We're just going to let it go and we'll see it mess up and we'll fix it when we need to. So I'm just going to let it run forward. It's analyzing the entire image. And it looks like, you know, we got a pretty nice motion path. I'm using the bracket key to come back until it goes off screen. So how do you fix stuff that goes off screen? Real easy. First thing we do is get rid of the bad tracking data. So to get rid of the bad tracking data, as this path went a little haywire as it left the screen, you can see right there. What I'll do is open up the spline editor up here in the upper right, drops it down here, turn the checkbox on, and then let's evaluate this and remove some keyframes. First thing I generally do with the spline editor open is I hit this fit to fill button right there. So that will show you just a better overall view of everything. It fits all the keys down there for you. And then the other thing I want to do is, well, I guess we'll wait for that thing to back up. We're going to take a look at when it goes bad. So what's the last good frame? For me, as I step through, it looks like it was good until frame 1030, but everything after that was bad. So an easy way to get rid of those keyframes is just box select or just like kind of lasso those and then hit the delete key. But you'll notice it does not, the path does not continue off the frame. So the way you can easily continue the trajectory from these last 2 keyframes off screen is just to right click in the node graph down here and choose what's called gradient extrapolation. So that basically says this curve is going to continue onward and upward from that same location there. So, and it's in both directions of that path. But you can see now it moves nicely across. And then if we want to actually use this for stabilization, which is how this is going to be so easy to do. Like if it's hard to paint something, well then just stabilize it. So much stuff is easier to do when it's locked off and stabilized. So with this tracker tool to stabilize it, all we need to do with this data is go to operation. We'll change the operation drop down here. Instead of saying none, we'll just say match move. And the inverse of this is actually if you change the merge, instead of saying foreground over background, you change this to BG only. BG only is basically the way you invert the data so that at the what's called the reference frame, it's locked off. Now, I'll talk about the reference frame in just a second, but you can see if we take a look at where this light is, we can tell if this is a good track by placing your cursor, letting go of everything else, and see, does that light stay put? It certainly does, and that makes it really easy to paint in the next chapter. But if we wanted this to be locked off to a different frame, maybe not the first frame, where you find that as far as the reference frame, that's under the match move settings, the reference section here where it says reference is set to start. That means the first frame of the composition. If you choose end, that means it's going to lock off around the last frame of the sequence. And then there's one called select time, which is basically where you started tracking from. Since we started from the first frame, it wouldn't make a difference. And you can't choose this afterwards, unfortunately. But you can see there is a difference here. If I chose it to last frame that it had tracked, that's not as useful for us for painting. So we will leave this on start. And what we need to do is rinse and repeat this process for the other 6 lights. I know you probably don't want to see me do the same thing 6 times over, so we're going to cut to this being finished unless there's a moment where I did something different than this process. Okay, one other thing I will point out as we clean up the tracking data is I've got 2 different tracks showing down here in the spline editor. One useful tool you can do to clean this up so you can just work on one track at a time is hit the 3-dot options menu and say show only selected tool. And now only tracker 2 for the second light over here is going to be visible. So it'll make it easier, as I say, fit to fill, to find when the track went haywire and when it's no good. So it looks like we were good up until this frame right here. So I will just lasso select those keys right there. I will right click, say gradient extrapolation. We'll see that continue off screen. And the other thing I forgot to mention before that I do want to make sure you're aware of is locking the tracks. So in case you come back later on, you don't accidentally retrack again. And that's in the tracker list. There's a checkbox here. If you just click this 1 more time or 2 more times, it goes to this solid mode, which basically says that track is locked. It's good to go. And again, we'll go to operation set to match move. Merge type is set to BG only. And if we take a look there, we've locked off the second tracker. Now on to 3. So tracker 3, TRACK. For tracker 5, which is basically, if I were to count from the right side to the left, the opposite way we read, so this would be tracker 1, 2, 3, 4. It's actually not on screen at the first frame. So I'll just do the opposite on this one. I'm gonna start at the end frame, which is gonna be frame 1048, and start at the end and go towards the beginning. It does require us to use those match move settings I talked about briefly before. So I'm going to pull our points right there, right on the tip, and then we'll track backwards. And it looks like that one was super clean all the way across. We'll change operation mode to match move, merge set to BG only. We'll lock the track. And the thing you'll notice here is that, well, one, I forgot to set the gradient extrapolation, but the other thing is if we take a look at the operation settings, I don't see it on screen long enough. So what I want to do is change our match move operations set to reference is to be the ending frame. The one we started tracking from was on the end. So now it's more visible on screen, much longer. But yeah, like I said before, we want to extrapolate that motion over time. So we'll go right click, gradient extrapolation. So now you can see it's wiping perfectly and staying completely put. One more tracker to go. Looks like it does not get as far, and the spline editor goes a little bit more wonky, if that's a good technical term. I'm just using the bracket key to get me back to where it actually had a point on that path that was good. And it looks like it got me to around frame 1029. So I'll just drag my lasso box selection down here, remove all those that I didn't want, right click and say gradient extrapolation, continues that path off screen. And then we're going to go to lock the tracker, operation, match move, merge, BG only, match move settings. We want it to be locked off at the end frame, 1048. So what we need to do is say our reference is actually the ending of the comp. So now we actually have that visible more in the center of the frame to do our painting on. Move this over here a little bit more so you can see our setup right now is basically just 6 different trackers. I'll move our media down here, and we're going to look at doing multi-stroke clone painting next. The clone multi-stroke tool is awesome if you just want to paint from a single frame because it's really fast. It stores all of the paint strokes in a single modifier. Here's how it works. So we're taking a look at our stabilized version from tracker 1. So it's this light right here. I'll just grab a paint tool from the toolbar. It'll add it right after because it was already selected. Tracker 1 was already selected. Let's load this up into our flow, and you'll see this is the one that no one talks about on YouTube. It's the second one of these brushes across here. It's the clone multi-stroke. So we'll select that, and then the way this works is we need to put something in the source toolbox as well over here so that I can extract the paint later, and I can also choose a different frame from that media source. So how do we load this up? The easiest way is just to drag the output of this tracker 1 into there. So the way it works, I'm just going to click hard, I keep dragging, and then release. It looks like I lost it when it went across that inspector bar there, but I didn't. It'll get loaded. And so the next thing we want to do is change this so we're using what's called a still source. So a still source is just a freeze frame. It's another frame in the sequence. Because we stabilized everything, the paint will just line up. It's kind of awesome. I'm going to click still source, and then the next thing we need to do is choose a source time. The source time right here is basically the frame number you want to paint from. So I want to paint from whatever the brightest frame is, and then just have that track and match move throughout the entire shot. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to come down to my timeline and look for a frame where the light is on for this specific light. So let's see. Looks like it's on and brightest right around, let's say it's going to be 1013. So what I'll do is go to source time, type that in, 1013, hit return. And what that means is when I go to paint now, I'm painting from that frame. In fact, if I go to a different frame, I'll go back a couple frames to a darker frame, you'll notice all I need to do is just start dropping paint. I don't need to do like an option click. I want it to be in the exact same location. You can see I'm painting in the light from the other frame. To be more visual on what's actually happening here is we might want to extract just the paint stroke. And we do that with a brightness contrast node, or it's one of the ways. I did a tutorial last week that was all about how you can control transparency with brightness contrast. This is kind of a follow-up to that. So after the tracker tool, to exclude just the paint stroke, just what we did for just that area, you'll grab a brightness contrast tool. I'll just grab it from the toolbar because I've got my cursor and that's a little more visual. And in the brightness contrast tool, what we need to do is enable the alpha channel. And then we're going to multiply, which is gain. We're going to bring that all the way down to 0. And you can see now we've exposed just the paint completely separately. So we can comp this back on the original plate and retain all the original qualities of everything else. In fact, I can even see there's part of here that I didn't paint all that great. So I might come back in here and just get a little bit more of that edge. I probably don't want to get too much of the outside of the lights because there was parallax and the single point track is not going to take care of that. If you ever go too far, just flip your pen around or use the eraser and you can kind of paint away all of that multi-stroke as well. Now that that is set up, what we need to do is extend this so that it lasts longer than a single frame. So if you're unaware, one of the reasons a lot of people say never use multi-stroke because it lasts for one frame, we just need to freeze this frame. So if you take a look at the output of the paint and I go to another frame, I'm just going to use the bracket keys, it completely disappears. We need to freeze this frame right after. We'll do that with a time speed node. So shift space, time speed. What do we want to do with this node? I'm going to load it into the viewer. We're going to say freeze frame. So now this paint stroke is existing on all frames in your sequence. And another little performance trick, anytime you use a freeze frame, it's a good idea to tell the node to not update frame after frame because it just takes more cache. So one thing you can do is you can right click on a node and go to modes and just say update and disable update. It's just going to make everything run a little bit faster. So here is our painted still that we just need to reintroduce the movement again with a match move. So how does that work? We just take the original tracker, Command C, right after the time speed, Command V, and what we need to do is we actually need to change the operation for the merge. So we actually want to change this to do match moving, which means we want it to be the foreground again. So rather than the background, which is stabilization, we want it to do the actual movement of the tracker. So we're going to do actually foreground only, but we actually need to have a background to set the resolution, and there's nothing in the foreground right now. So the easiest little trick to this is you double feed the time speed node. So the time speed is going into the background and the foreground. The only thing used out of it, of course, is the foreground, because that's what our merge mode is set to. But this is going to allow us to get the movement, there we go, of that light across on all the frames. And then we just merge this over the original plate. So I'll just grab a merge node. We'll take the original background. We'll just use the Rec 709 version. Plug the cleaned up plate, cleaned up light that's always on over the top, and there it goes. The rest of this is really just a rinse and repeat of all this whole process. So I don't want you to sit and watch me do that on all the other 5 here. So I'll just speed this part up and I'll cut in again if I have any little extra tidbits to add. Loading the tracker 2 this time into the source well. I'm saying still source. In fact, it might be a good idea to merge all of these patches together in a single multi-merge and then merge those over the original plate. So here's how that would work. I'm just going to grab what's called multi-merge, which allows you to connect lots of different patches. So we've got 2 patches in there, and we'll use that over the original. Let's use this frame, 1036 is our time offset, so still source. Now, I want to call a quick timeout before I put the time speed on this final node, because I just want to point something out. If you work on this later and you need to manipulate the multi-stroke paint and you don't know what frame it was on, I'm going to show you where you can find that. Because if I were to go to another frame right now, see it just pops off. And yeah, time speed is going to hold that for us, but if you need to go manipulate this specific stroke, open the keyframes palette, and then choose the selected tool. So this paint 6, and just like before, if you come down to the 3-dot options menu and say show only selected tools, we'll toggle this down. Let's say make this thing fit. You can actually see down here in the ruler bar, that's the effective paint stroke. So that's the frame you would need to go and manipulate if you needed to change it later on, because you can see it's only valid on that specific frame. So in case you need to make a change, that's where you would do it. It's all stored in a single modifier, which is super, super fast. And now you should see that moving along. And all we're going to do is just load this one into our multi-merge as well. So we've got 6 different lights that essentially have been frozen in time, literally, on whatever the brightest value that we determined to paint from. And the reason the paint was so easy is because we stabilized everything. Stabilization just makes everything so much easier. The only thing I would say at this point is to make sure you're doing proper compositing in linear and affecting everything as least as possible. We can put this back into log at this point so that the colorist has everything to work with. And the way I probably go about doing that is just up here at the top, where we had our color space transform that took us into Rec 709, which was really ideal for tracking. I probably would just take this here and change this so we're affecting it the least possible. We're not doing any tone mapping, anything like that. What we'll do is we'll have our inputs set, those are correct, but our output color space, we'll leave this alone at Rec 2020, so that's the color gamut. And the output gamma, the best thing you want to use for compositing in general, is linear. And then you turn off the tone mapping. So this would be a typical how to easily set something up for linear, is you leave the color space, the gamut alone, and you just go from the log space to the linear space. And the nice thing about this tool is it has a swap button. So what you do is you take this, we say Command C or Control C to copy it. And then down here at the end of your comp, we'll do Command V right before we go back out to the timeline. And on the second one, we just say swap. And effectively, we put this back into log space, but all the compositing happened in linear. We go to our media out, which takes us back to the edit timeline. Let's do X marks the spot. We've got it on loop. We'll hit P for presentation. And all of the light flickering is completely gone. And it's not playing back super smooth. We probably should turn on the cache. We'll do that up here at the top, playback. You could also render this in lots of ways. Let's just do smart render cache and put a color grade on this on top on the color page. So shift space. Why don't I actually use, I'll just use the color space transform. So just like before, you could do, be careful, Apple Log 2 is actually a gamut. It's not a log profile. It's kind of confusing. So on the newer phones, they use Apple Log 2 as the color gamut, but the gamma or the transfer function is actually Apple Log. And I'll choose Rec 709, Rec 709, and you could do all your color grading right here on the color page, and basically you've affected the pixels the least possible and done a proper linear compositing workflow. Hey, my name is Chadwick. If we haven't met yet, I super appreciate you for sticking through this with me today and learning a little bit of compositing basics. And because there's so much more to learn, I'll see you in the next video.